Good day, and welcome to our webcast, 5 concrete examples of edge computing applications viewed through the lens of the edge computing maturity model. Today's webinar is brought to you by CFE Media and Technology and sponsored by Stratus Technologies. Joining us today will be John Fryer, Senior Director, Industry Solutions, Stratus. I'm Kevin Parker, an editor with CFE Media and Technology. Results of the Stratus 2019 Edge Computing Trend Report indicate 94% of engineer and technician survey respondents say additional skills are required to maximize edge computing effectiveness. Yet 66% of respondents report they are either planning or have implemented some aspects of edge computing. To help organizations plan deployments and achieve simple, protected, and autonomous edge solutions that ensure business-critical applications continuous availability, Stratus has developed a 5-stage maturity model based on insights gained from nearly 40 years of expertise in zero-touch computing. Stay tuned to hear a real-world discussion about how innovative companies are achieving peak performance from the shop floor to the control room. You'll gain a better understanding of the if, when, and how of edge computing. To get the best results from the webcast platform, please make note of the following as you participate in today's event. If you are having technical problems, click on the question mark at the top right-hand corner of your screen to bring up a list of system checks to make before escalating to an online technician. If you experience issues with the slides or audio, please refresh the browser or click the Refresh Media button directly under the presenter's headshot. You can control the volume settings of this webcast by adjusting the volume on your computer or by adjusting the volume on the platform. If a technician is needed, type a message into the Ask a Question box and someone will get to you as quickly as possible. Answers to technical questions will be found in the Answered Questions box on the left-hand side of the screen. The Ask a Question box is also used to ask the speakers questions. Ask questions at any time during the presentation. We'll get to as many as time allows. To download the presentation slides and certificate of completion, use the Event Resources box on the left-hand side of your screen. The presentation slides include links to other Stratus deliverables. Download the presentation and certificate of completion until the conclusion of the webcast. The link will break when the webcast signs off. This webcast is being recorded, including the Q&A session. We'll send you an email message within a week with a direct link to the webcast archive. I'd now like to introduce our speaker, John Fryer. John is Senior Director, Industry Solutions at Stratus Technologies, where he is responsible for the go-to-market strategies and industry initiatives across all the company's product lines. He has more than 25 years of experience with systems and software products in a variety of engineering, marketing, and executive roles at successful startups and major companies, including Motorola, Emerson Network Power, and Oracle. His experience includes more than 15 years working with high availability solutions for the enterprise, automation, and networking industries. John, welcome to today's webinar, and please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Kevin, and welcome everybody today. Our subject matter today is really all about edge computing, digital transformation, and really the stages that people go through to achieve digital transformation. Before we get started, though, a little bit about Stratus. As a company, we've been in business for many, many years. The real focus of the company has always been in and around providing continuously available systems, fault-tolerant systems, in a very wide variety of industries. We probably process about 70% of the world's credit card transactions. So think about a point of sale system. When you swipe a credit card, you want to make sure, you want to know that that transaction has gone through. It isn't a case of did it, maybe, yes, no. And certainly if you're a credit card processor, you want to make sure you capture that transaction, because if it fails, the customer will just pull out a different credit card and it will go to a different sort of credit card processor. Over the years, Stratus has been involved with many different industries. So as I said, anywhere where downtime is a bad thing. So public safety, for example, E911 systems, healthcare, transportation, but really our focus in the last several years has been in and around the industrial automation industry and the various verticals it serves, particularly as those automation systems become critical to the operation of businesses where they're in remote locations, where there's little or no IT expertise, and there's a need for continuous availability to keep production running or to keep a natural gas pipeline running or a water and wastewater treatment plant going. So that's where you find Stratus in a lot of these businesses. But increasingly, what we've come to focus on in the last 1 to 2 years is the emerging area of edge computing, and particularly edge computing as it starts to apply to traditional sort of control systems and automation systems, but also to industrial Internet of Things applications and the whole area of digital transformation. And clearly, as those compute platforms make their way out into the operational technology environment, the expertise to manage, maintain, install these systems generally is not there. So our real focus in and around edge computing is systems that are very, very simple to deploy, manage, and operate, systems that are protected both from protecting the operation and ensuring continuous availability, but also from a cybersecurity and a physical sort of security perspective when it comes down to it. And obviously systems that will operate autonomously in the sense that they will take care of themselves, they will predict if they're going to have a failure and protect the workloads that are running on them, and also offer automated administration and remote management capabilities to go forward with that. So as we've moved into edge computing, as Kevin said earlier, we conducted a whole survey with CFE Media and produced sort of this edge computing trend report. And Kevin already explained some of the results that we saw, but a couple of startling things sort of stood out here. Is one, a lot of people really view edge computing, although in some ways people say, yes, it's kind of been there in the automation industry for quite some time, but really modern systems and what you can do today with technologies like virtualization, it really represents a big leap forward in what you can do. And clearly a lot of people in the industry are out there actively evaluating how they can use edge computing, what they can use it before, but the real startling point that came out is people are still looking for education, they're still looking for help in terms of what's going on, and in particular when it comes to digital transformation and IIoT type projects, people are really wondering where to get started. So coming out of that report, and with the expertise that we've developed in working with our customer base over more than 10 years now in the industrial space, that led us to develop what we call the Edge Computing 5 Eyes Maturity Model. Now, this is an eyeful of a chart, as you'll see in a minute, so we're not really going to dwell on this at the moment, but just a few things to point out here. Digital transformation is a journey. It's not a one and done, set it and forget it, and you connect to the cloud and you do machine learning and everything's done. All right, there are a whole set of stages that you need to go through to get there, and that's obviously represented along the top of the chart here. And at each of these different stages, you get a different set of capabilities that you can expect to leverage in terms of making your business more efficient. Those capabilities are really driven by three things: people, processes, and technology. And having the right alignment of those three things at each stage is really what's critical in making digital transformation projects successful. We read a lot, we see a lot of people who've going down a digital transformation path, and they're actually struggling with what's going on. And it generally ends up that one way or another, they've sort of lagged behind in some particular area. Maybe the people who are trying to implement the projects or run the systems of that don't really have all the skills that are necessary to take them to the level that people want to be at. Maybe it's that some of the technology that's employed really isn't up to the task in terms of that, what's there. So again, we're not going to dwell on this, but clearly this is something that you can have access to. We find it very useful in terms of talking to our customers so that we can help them evaluate where they are, what they're trying to do, where they might have areas of weakness that they need to think more about. So it's much broader than just edge computing when it comes down to it. And it's really, I think people are finding it a very valuable resource in terms of helping them figure out how they move forward. Today, we're really just going to focus on two areas. You know, Stratus's area of expertise in and around computing, and in particular edge computing, and the kinds of capabilities that people can expect. And we figure that the best way to do this is to step through 5 case studies of customers who are at these various stages, so you can get to see some real idea in terms of what they're trying to do, what results that they've experienced from that, and how this is helping them potentially prepare to move to the next stage that's moving on. So, you know, if we look at this sort of isolated stage, you know, there are many examples out there today. It's we at Stratus still see, you know, a lot of this. Companies who've maybe brought in a smart machine, or they've got, you know, a production line that's sort of automated, or multiple production lines, each of which is automated independently. They're not tied together. This is fairly typical of what's gone on in the automation industry and in the industrial world for, you know, the last 20, 30 years. And again, it very much depends on the company and what they're trying to do. And the example that we've got here today is of a company who is in the lumber manufacturing industry. So it's a classic example of a plant that's out into a remote location, obviously located close to the source of lumber. They make many products, and clearly there's a lot of energy involved in processing wood and wood pulp in order to make things like plywood, fiberboard, et cetera. And this company was interested in upgrading their boiler room capability to make it much more efficient, to align it much more with their business objectives, and generally to become much more efficient in terms of that. So the real challenges that they faced were, obviously, it's a remote location, okay, and it's a non-IT environment. So, you know, the boiler room is not something that the IT guys probably even think about when it comes down to it. So they really, you know, one wanted a future-proof solution, one that they could potentially enhance and maybe down the road connect to the rest of the plant. So depending on what the manufacturing requirements might be in the future, they would be able to, you know, integrate with the boiler room to estimate the kind of energy needs that they would run so that the plant would obviously run more efficiently. They obviously wanted to have multiple HMIs. Big plant, lots of capability, people in the boiler room being able to do other things as well. Obviously, they looked at a range of solutions, including traditional sort of IPCs, which is what you would generally expect for this type of SCADA type of application there. And ultimately, what they chose was the Stratus ZTC platform. So small platform, ruggedized, able to be supported locally because of its simplicity of operation, giving them continuous availability with an integrated redundancy solution that's there. And in their particular case, you know, because of the size of the plant and clearly, you know, some of the risks that are involved, they actually wanted the 2 units that form the solution to be sort of geographically dispersed, you know, across the plant. Again, key aspect to this was the use of virtualization that enabled them to support multiple applications, and in particular to implement the Rockwell Thin Manager solution, which would enable them to have multiple HMIs that can be used in different parts of the plants, that operators with different access levels could be able to dial into. So, it gave them the productivity they wanted, it gave them the increased efficiency they wanted, and eliminated concerns that they had around downtime with this boiler room application. So very typical example of a kind of isolated environment that you get in that first stage of the maturity model. So the second stage here is one that's very familiar to Stratus. A lot of our business today is still in and around people who are at this informed kind of stage, maybe where they have multiple assets that are automated in a plant and they want to connect them together. So it can be a control room environment for a production plant. It can be tying together, multiple locations in a wastewater treatment operation with multiple facilities that are there. It can be things like multiple compression stations in a natural gas pipeline, for example, making sure that they can be tied together. So the single site, multi-asset kind of things, control room environment with multiple applications, again, often in locations where there isn't a lot of IT expertise available, where IT doesn't want to go, can't go, kind of environment. Very, very typical of what we've seen, again, over the last 10 to 20 years in the industrial automation space. And the example that we've got here is a really good one. So Rubberlight is a corporation that's focused on making plastics and materials. They're a company that's grown over the last sort of 20 years of their operation. Some of the concerns and some of the challenges that they really had were with their aging systems, increased downtime, and also because of the modern processes and the need to rapidly change and customize what they're making. They had a lot of wastage that was there, and clearly that cost them a lot of money. So what they wanted to do was, maximize the control of the entire plant, make it much more efficient, reduce a lot of this wastage, and also give themselves a scalable solution that, as the company continues to expand, would enable them to, one, add more applications, more production lines, but later down the road, maybe start to do more analytics in terms of what's going on there. So they looked at a range of options here. Typical IT type solutions where you would get a server farm or a cluster of servers, using traditional IT virtualization capabilities. Issue that they ran into with a lot of those was cost, in actual fact, because as they deploy a clustered solution, they need licenses for each application on every server that's there. They also had complexity in terms of requiring things like a storage area network to get the level of availability that they needed. And ultimately, they found Stratus. They looked at our FT server solution, which is a traditional sort of server size model that gives them a fault-tolerant solution, enables them to run standard IT operating systems and virtualization capabilities in terms of that, and gives them the continuous availability that they're looking for to make their systems run very, very efficiently. In this case, it was a partnership with Wonderware System Platform in terms of operation. And really one of the key factors ultimately for them was with the FT server solution, they only need one copy of the operating system virtualization and the application licenses. So it becomes very, very cost effective for them. And it's a system that they really don't have to worry about when it comes to the operation system. It takes care of itself. If there's an issue, it calls back to Stratus. We send them out a replacement part should it be necessary, and it's all hot swappable. In fact, the applications don't even know that anything has failed or anything has been swapped out, and it resynchronizes itself automatically for that. Since they put this system in, they've had 100% operational continuity, no downtime at all. They've also had no data loss, which helps them as they look towards doing some analytics further on. when it comes down to this. And really, it's given them a lot of scalability, with a very, very cost-effective solution. And as you can see, they've achieved a massive reduction in the wasted material that they've had, which has obviously increased their profitability as a company. So that's an example of the informed set. Again, very, very common application that Stratus sees. So the next stage, the insightful stage, is really that next step along the way. You've got, let's say, control of an entire plant. You can see what's going on. Now you want to try and get more out of that environment. You want to start to collect the data. You want to start to analyze that data. You want to feed the results back into that particular plant so that you can figure out how to make things run much more efficiently than before in terms of that. And often in this situation, you're talking about a plant that's starting to have edge computing applications distributed throughout that plant level environment, as well as potentially, a control room environment that's got everything centralized when it comes down to it. Again, a lot of the Stratus customer base today is sort of in that informed state, moving to the insightful state increasingly. We're seeing our customers deployed into this insightful state where they're starting to take advantage of some of the real promise that you get with digital transformation. So the example that we have here is Buckeye Partners, and if you don't know them, they're one of the major players in the oil terminal business. They also have pipeline capabilities that comes with it, and Stratus has been engaged with them for some time. They had an old system with a piece of software that's very important to them, supplied by one particular company, Top Tech, this TMS6. This is a piece of software that they'd sort of acquired and were modifying internally, and it originally came as like an appliance type solution. Well, the underlying platform was old, didn't really allow for expansion, and they needed to move forward because their objective over time is to integrate more applications into the edge computing environment to give them more real-time feedback, control of some areas versus having to have everything centralized, and potentially in locations that may become disconnected, meaning that they would lose control and have to revert to, say, manual operation. So they engaged with Stratus. They came and selected the ZTC solution that we have. So a ruggedized platform, again, that has all the capabilities of simple, protected, and autonomous. So it could be easily operated and managed. And the key aspect here for them was they said to us, look, we have locations that some of them need redundancy because they're very, very critical to us. Others don't. And what we're looking for is a commonality of management solution, a commonality of operation, so that anybody can go in and maintain, manage, and operate these particular things. So although Stratus has been known for producing fault-tolerant and highly available systems, we now actually have what we call a single-node solution, a non-redundant solution, which comes under the same management and maintenance umbrella, and this ideally fits the kind of environment that Buckeye needs. So they've got those remote locations where they need the ruggedized operation. Some areas are critical, and one of the other things they said was, hey, some of our non-redundant locations, they may become critical to us. We need it to be very, very easy to upgrade so that we can have a redundant solution and deploy more applications in the future. So we've made it very easy for somebody to go from a non-redundant to a redundant solution simply by just plugging in another unit. No scripting, no involvement, can be done by an operator, and the whole system will synchronize up, recognize it's now redundant, and start to take care of itself from that perspective. So this is relatively new custom for us. We're talking about a large number of installations here that will take over a period of time. They're already starting to see some benefits in terms of less downtime, increased efficiency, they're saving time in a lot of areas, and we look forward to this being very, very successful. But the key aspect to this is, they want to be able to collect data. They want to be able to do analytics in terms of what's going forward. So very representative of the sort of, forward-looking, forward-moving generation of customers now who are moving much more into this digital transformation phase where they're looking to leverage data and analytics together using a single sort of platform for both the control side and the analytics side. So as we move forward, the next stage we call intelligent, and I think this very, very much represents, where you've got real integration across an enterprise from, the traditional OT side of things with the IT side up to cloud, potentially using machine learning technology in the cloud to drive efficiencies, maybe, for example, pushing algorithms that have been developed by the machine learning, pushing those down to edge platforms so that they can be used to run applications within a plant much more efficiently, those kinds of things. Real-time analytics potentially running at the edge alongside traditional control types of applications. We don't see many customers of this. I mean, you see a lot of this talked about in the media today. The fact of the matter is it's predominantly large companies who are doing a lot of this today with deep pockets, but it is out there and it is happening. And the example that we have in this area is a midstream gas pipeline company. They've been a customer of ours for a number of years. They a few years ago decided that they had to upgrade their entire pipeline infrastructure. They'd had explosions. They had old compression stations with turbines that were 50 years old. They'd had a fire at a storage facility, and really they recognized that they had to have a comprehensive rebuild, not just of the automation systems, but of the compression stations as well. And they initially went down a route of using off-the-shelf servers in, a non-IT environment, just the control room inside each of these compression plants. They started to have a lot of failures. It was costing them a lot of time. They'd have to gen up a new machine back at headquarters and drive out into the middle of nowhere, so they'd have 2 or 3 days of downtime, have to operate things manually. It really wasn't what they wanted. And then they found Stratus, and they again opted to deploy our FT server solution, gave them virtualization so they could consolidate everything onto a single platform in terms of that. But the key thing for them, and the one thing they decided to do from the beginning, was collect the data, send it back to headquarters, up to the cloud, and run machine learning to do predictive maintenance on the turbines, the compressors in the compression stations. That was the absolute critical thing to them, and they recognized that losing data when you get to these machine learning applications can really throw off the machine learning models. So no data loss was critical for them. It's exactly one of the things that the Stratus Edge computing solutions, both the FT server and the ZTC Edge, will give you. And it's been a very, very successful implementation for them. I know the last time I talked to this company, they said in the first 2 years of operation, they'd saved, I think, about $9 million in maintenance costs and unplanned downtime. The elimination of unplanned downtime. So a very, very successful operation. Very much an example of the kinds of things you can do when you start to integrate both the OT and the IT side together, and you start to leverage some of the new technologies such as machine learning that are out there. So the final stage, that we've come up in this Five Eyes model is what we call the invisible. And I think, we kind of think of this very much as the Star Trek approach, if you like. This is where a plant may be fully automated. You have very few resources. It kind of takes care of itself. Whether we ever get there, what this looks like in the end, I think is very much an unknown at this point in time, but I think it's the sort of ultimate sort of realization of digital transformation or Industry 4.0 or smart manufacturing, whatever term you want to pick, in terms of those kinds of things. So coming up with an example for this is a little bit tricky, but the one we've selected, again, which is not the whole range of things, but really sort of illustrates some of the things that are potentially coming down the road, is a company in the building products industry. They have automated warehouses with robots that will rack stack, pick products in terms of that. No real human interaction that goes on there. Obviously, there's some elements of SCADA control that go along with that, but also there's the algorithmic aspect of directing the robots where to go, in the most efficient manner to pick the products in terms of what to do. And, this company has chosen to use the Stratus ZTC Edge product for that. Again, in this kind of environment, uptime is everything. That system goes down, those robots don't move, you don't store products, you don't pick products, you don't get them to your customers in terms of that. And obviously, you're in an environment, once again, that there is little or no IT expertise. So although I know automated robots are not new, you look at companies like Amazon. They purchased a company, Kiva, 2 or 3 years ago, specifically to do that in their big warehouses. Well, this is a medium-sized company, I would say, who've been very innovative in terms of what they do, and they're able to start to leverage some of these technologies to gather data, to process it in real time. Obviously, to direct those robots where to go, what products to get. Et cetera, et cetera. So again, this is a pilot project. It's relatively new. They expect really efficiency drivings and everything I know about what's going on at the moment. It's being very successful. Assuming all goes well, then they'll be rolling this out to 10 plus manufacturing sites in the future. So very exciting, very sort of innovative thing that's coming to the industrial automation world. When it comes to it. So I think with that, I'm going to hand it back to Kevin. I think we may have 1 or 2 questions from that perspective. Obviously, there are some assets here that you're welcome to get. I'm sure Kevin can give you information about how you might get those, but if not, you can find them on the Stratus website. So with that, I'm going to hand back to you, Kevin.
Well, thanks so much, John. And we do have a few more than just a few questions for you. But before we get to that, I do want to remind our listeners that you can access the 3 resources you see on the screen by downloading the slide set using the resources box and then clicking on the links on the slide as shown. So we hope you'll avail yourself of that. So now let's turn to our brief Q&A session. John, when new technologies are introduced into the manufacturing and production space, typically there's kind of 2 aspects to it. There's the technology that's meant for the very largest corporations, and then there's that is suited for small to mid-size enterprises, which can have as much as $1 billion in revenues. But my question is, do you see those from Stratus's point of view? Are those 2 markets different? And at the end of the day, what stage would you expect those small to mid-size enterprises to be at on their journey through the map?
That's a great question, Kevin. So I mean, if you look at the case studies we've got here, the more advanced stages, the informed, the insightful, the insightful and the intelligent in particular, they're large companies, very large companies, deep pockets. They've got the opportunity to experiment a little bit and learn in terms of that. But if you look overall at Stratus's business profile, most of our customers are smaller to medium-sized companies. And most of them are in the informed, insightful, occasionally in the isolated stage, excuse me, in terms of what they're doing. And, they're really just focused often on getting new generation as of technology that are preparing them to move forward. So it's not just the edge computing aspect that needs to be taken care of. Often there's PLC upgrades, there's networking upgrades, but the key thing I think that companies need to watch out for is, do they have the right skill sets to accomplish a lot of what they're looking for? This sort of convergence of OT and IT that's talked about, that's there. I mean, one of the things that we have is an increasingly robust program around system integrators. And system integrators, I think, for small and medium companies can be a real resource, good system integrator in helping them achieve what they want to do. Also, I think, the maturity model that we've developed can really help everybody scan down and see, if I want to move, say, from the informed to the insightful stage, what kinds of things do I need to have in order to be successful there? And it's often, as we start to talk to companies, who are, say, in that informed stage, they realize that, they've got some gaps. All right, they thought they had everything together, but if they want to move forward, they need some updated technology. Cybersecurity is obviously one of those things that pops up a lot in the OT space. But from an edge computing perspective, the platforms that we have give our customers a great deal of flexibility to very, very easily deploy the traditional applications that they run, but also prepare for the new applications that they may not even thought of that they're going to need in the future.
Good, thank you so much. And I would only add that just yesterday we did a webinar on the skills gap in manufacturing and talked about that OT, IT shift that you mentioned, and also the one between the data scientists and engineers on the one hand and the subject matters on the experts on the other. And that's really set up a very interesting dynamic when you look at statistics from the Bureau of Labor Statistics showing the increase in demand for mathematicians and operations research specialists in the manufacturing space. So thanks much for that answer. Another question for you, John, though, is another way that people look at technology implementations are whether they occur in a greenfield environment or are part of a brownfield exercise. Do you have any particular thoughts about where edge computing is most likely to be found, and what's the way forward for edge computing in that regard?
Yeah, so I think there are relatively few greenfield implementations that go on in the industrial automation space these days. Yes, there are new plants, and we've got customers who have built plants from the ground up, and they have the choice of what they want to do. I think those are relatively rare. Most of what we get involved with are older systems being upgraded, or there's some capability to be added to a plant, and they realize that the legacy technology they have just can't support what they want to do. Or, very commonly they've had a particular set of problems that have caused loss of business, low efficiency, regulatory issues, etc., that really mean that they recognize they've got to upgrade the systems that they've got. So edge computing can fit into any environment. We installed for a small company down I think in Pennsylvania, or maybe down in the Atlanta area, an ice cream manufacturer. Small company, they've been expanding fast, been around since the 20s, and they decided they needed to build a new plant, and they were able to run the entire plant on a Stratus ZTC. So a classic example of somebody building something and being right in that sort of informed stage. Whether they ever get to an insightful stage, I don't know. But they know how to make ice cream. They really don't know an awful lot about the automation side, and they used a very good system integrator who's a partner of ours to do the whole implementation and who does the monitoring for them in terms of that. But most of the examples that you see here are really what I would term sort of brownfield applications. The building products company, maybe is a little bit more towards a greenfield one. But all of those other examples are really brownfield applications where they're upgrading and adding capability when it comes down to it.
Good. Thank you, John. People often speak, or in the past have spoken about distributed control or distributed applications. And I'm just curious as to if someone would say we have distributed applications, at what stage of the maturity model would you put them at?
Good question. So I think, again, it's more to do with the kinds of capabilities they want to achieve rather than, whether they're distributed or not distributed. So generally, that layer of distribution comes in, starts with the informed level. So if you've got a, pretty big plant, you may have a hierarchical a SCADA system these days, if it's a modern one that you've got out there, with multiple edge computing nodes, say out on a plant floor somewhere, coming back to a centralized control room. You may or may not be collecting data for analytic purposes at that point in time. You may well have aspirations to do that in the future. So it's really more to do with what it is you're trying to achieve based on the technology, people, and processes you've got, rather than, what kind of stage you're at.
Good. When you are introduced to companies that are contemplating incorporating edge applications into their manufacturing processes, what normally is the weakest link or most fundamental concern? Is it data security and hacking? Is it the poor quality of data that ends up being accessed, or some other?
That's again, I think this is an excellent question. Clearly, the first thing that's foremost on anybody's mind when it comes to the analytics side is the security aspect of it. The fear that interconnection of a plant to the rest of the enterprise, the internet, whatever it happens to be, opens up the plan to hacking, and it's a serious concern. I mean, this is the first area I think that we see where there's real, needs to be real convergence between OT and IT, because IT has the skills there, OT often doesn't. Certainly not at the moment. But and I know a lot of OT people who are building skills in that area, but it's a very, very sort of complex area. Now, your other point is also a good one as well. The quality of the data that's being collected. One of the I think issues that's starting to crop up now, excuse me, as people particularly go into the intelligent phases, there's a lot of data out there that's already being collected by automation systems into historians. That has been for many, many years. The problem is that data doesn't have any particular structure to it often. It comes from different systems, some of which may be very old, some of which may be new. Okay, you've got historians like OSI Pi and so on who can help manage that data, but I think there's serious concerns about, one, how good is that data, particularly if it's time series data. How accurate is the timing from one edge system to another edge system? Timing starts to become important when you're correlating data across, multiple physical locations that are maybe coming from different PLCs or different sensors or whatever it happens to be. The second thing is how much of that data is really needed and is useful for some of these advanced machine learning type of applications. You don't want to be sending huge volumes of data up to a cloud application because, it starts to get expensive, whether you like it or not. Bandwidth is not free, even though it's a lot cheaper than it used to be. And that's a serious concern. So there's a lot of, use now of edge systems to do data filtering, to figure out what's required for machine learning applications, what actually, if you like, has a short lifespan and can be used for some level of real-time analytics that's pertinent to the control applications that you're working with, whether it's advanced process control, whether it's safety, whether it's quality control, those kinds of things.
Good. John, in your answer just now, you indicated that the intelligence stage is where you're beginning to really achieve a lot of integration. I mean, when someone says integration, that can mean a lot of different things. What do you see as being some of the most common means of achieving that integration?
Okay, so I think the interconnection is really starting at that insightful stage. We're seeing enterprises, the IT people interconnect to the OT people, wanting to pull some data out of the plant primarily. All right, in that kind of situation. When you get to the intelligence stage, we're talking about what you might term much more IT-centric applications that are being driven by some of these data scientists and the like that you talked about earlier. Those kinds of applications being pushed down to edge computing platforms to live alongside the traditional automation and control applications that the OT people have known for a long, long time. So that's really, I think, when you start to see, that true level of integration, and it's obviously the area where, you start to get some friction. I mean, one of the things, for example, that we deal with all the time between the OT and the IT guys is patching, right? You can't just arbitrarily decide to patch an OT system, running a control system for a production line. You'll bring the production line down. Yet there may be security vulnerabilities that are required, to effectively run that platform. It's fairly easy for the IT guys and the analytics applications with virtualization to download new applications, but they've got to be careful they don't interfere with the sort of OT operations. Excuse me. And I think that's where a lot of the coming together needs to happen between the IT world and the OT world.
Good. We're coming to the end of today's broadcast, John. I do want to ask you one final question. I think in over the course of your career, you've probably been involved in or at least witnessed the introduction of a lot of different diverse technologies into the manufacturing space. SCADA comes to mind, perhaps computer-aided design, or even ERP systems. How would you compare, and what do you feel is interesting about edge computing as a necessary follow-on to the introduction of cloud, as compared to some of those other instances of introduction and exploitation of technologies that we've seen in the last 20 or 30 years?
Okay, so I think edge computing is really sort of one part of a series of things that are happening. I don't think there's one thing that you could point to and say, oh, that's a game changer. Edge computing is really an enabler, all right, for a lot of these new applications that are coming along, integration with machine learning, okay, real-time analytics, better data collection and filtering to send it up to the cloud where you've got massive compute power, to live alongside the traditional, OT applications that are still going to be there. They're not going anywhere at all. So it really, is an enabler for a lot more flexibility that companies can use to do things in new and innovative ways when it comes down to it. So, although at Stratus we might like to think it's a huge game changer for the industry, it's not, all right? But it is an essential component of helping companies move forward to realize digital transformation and to really get much more efficient use out of that sort of plant infrastructure that they've got.
Well, thanks, John. That's all the questions that we have time today. I'd like to thank our attendees for spending some time with us today. We hope that the webinar suited your purposes. For more information, go to the website link noted in the interface. I'd like to thank our sponsor, Stratus Technology, for today's webcast. And now that we're just about done, we'd like to hear how we did. The exit survey will pop up on your screen as soon as this webcast ends. Please take a moment to complete it as we use this information to improve our webinars. On behalf of CFE Media and Technology and Stratus Technologies, thanks, and we'll see you next time.